When Dead Cells first launched on Android in June 2020, I was already somewhat familiar with the game despite never having played it. I knew that it was a 2D action platformer roguelike with metroidvania qualities like unlockable abilities that would open up new areas of the map. I knew the game's visual style and was readily able to identify screenshots or footage from it, and I knew that it had been remarkably well received, earning its spot as one of gaming's indie sweethearts since its original launch on PC and console 2 years prior in 2018. Despite all of this, it took until the Android launch for me to actually sit up and take notice of the game, and I'm so glad that I did. Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie, and today we're going to be talking about Motion Twin's frenetic roguelike action platformer, Dead Cells. As mentioned, I was well aware of Dead Cells and its many accolades by the time that it launched onto Android in June 2020, a full 2 years after its initial launch and almost a full year after iOS. I'd seen reviews, even watched game design videos on it, but for some reason, I never actually took the plunge and played it until then. I think for the longest time I had some misconception or misunderstanding about procedurally generated games that had put me off them. Whilst friends ranted and raved about other games like The Binding of Isaac, Spelunky and Rogue Legacy, I could never get into them, and I think that if I'm being honest, it was a snobbish part of me that wrote off procedural generation as the lazy option for developers who couldn't be bothered to learn good level design. These days, I'm happy to admit just how wrong I was. Now, I downloaded Dead Cells on the day of its Android launch, the same day we headed off to Masuna for a couple of weeks, and during that time, I barely put the game down. There was just something about the game that hooked me. In hindsight, it's pretty obvious that I'd love it. The fact that the game ticks literally every single box on the checklist of things that I look for in a game is a bit of a dead giveaway. If you've watched my recent Best Console Games of 2021 video, you'll know of my love for metroidvania games, for soulslikes, for dark fantasy settings, and for story told as much through creative world design as through traditional text and dialogue. Dead Cells has all of this and more. Dead Cells is one of those games that kind of just drops you in the deep end and lets you drown a few times before you figure out which way is up. Then it drops you in a few more times before you learn to actually swim. You play as the Prisoner, an amorphous green blob that puppeteers the corpse of a beheaded prisoner throughout the game. Whilst the Prisoner is immortal, the bodies it's inhabiting are not, and so death does result in the player losing all collected souls and progress, as the prisoner slinks off back to the start to collect a new body and start again. This sounds pretty punishing, and to be fair, it kind of is. Combat is brutal in Dead Cells, relying on swift reactions to either dodge oncoming attacks or to parry them, opening enemies up for counter-strikes. Timing is everything, and for a game of this genre, combat is astonishingly fast-paced. There are ways to mitigate your losses through death though, so all is not lost and there is a palpable sense of progression as you die and try again over and over. At the start of each run, you're given the option of several weapons with randomized attributes to choose from, drawn from the pool of weapons and upgrades that you've unlocked so far. As you kill enemies, you collect cells, which can be banked with merchants to unlock new weapons and items to appear in the world as you continue onward. Just don't bother with the sandals, hey? You'll also be able to purchase mutations, temporary upgrades to assist you in each run, and refill your potion bottle, a healing item with limited uses, kind of like the Estus Flask from Dark Souls. As you explore the island fortress that Dead Cells is set in, you'll learn more about this kingdom, the malaise that overcame it, and the events that transpired to leave this world in the sorry state that it's in. Notes left behind by previous prisoners, guards, and the alchemists tasked with handling the situation paint the grim tale that befell the land, though much of this is optional, and it is entirely possible to complete several runs of the game with no real idea of what's actually going on if you're not the type to stop and smell the roses, or read the optional notes as it were. As you proceed, in addition to unlocking new items to appear on runs, you'll gradually unlock an arsenal of new permanently lasting abilities that open up new areas for you to explore. What may seem like a fairly short game the first time that you complete it, turns out to be only the tip of the iceberg by the time you've unlocked a few upgrades and found entirely new routes from start to finish. These take you through some truly terrifying new areas that mix up the environmental threats to entirely new levels, from raw sewage to poorly lit areas, even to toxic miasmas that require you to speed through in order to survive. Speaking of speed, that's another area that Dead Cells absolutely thrives in. On one hand, the game rewards thorough exploration with both lore and notes as to the story, with more cells to purchase upgrades, and scrolls that you can use to temporarily upgrade your character's stats and abilities for the run you're currently on. On the other hand, there are doors and events that will only appear if you make it to them within a certain time limit, having killed so many enemies or having taken no damage at all in certain situations. This rewards future runs through different playstyles, and speedrunning the game is absolutely a goal to attempt due to the plethora of upgrades and rewards that it can shower you with. I found that delving deep the first few times I attempted a run helped me to suss out the basics of that new area, learning different enemies' vulnerabilities and attack patterns, understanding how that area was actually laid out. Yeah, even though each area is generated randomly each time, there are certain rules that each area follows that you can figure out to make future runs that little bit smoother. Now, once I had an area down pat, the game rewarded me for speeding up my clear times with even more rewards, double dipping on rewards for players who take time to understand and learn the game. Masterful design. And all of this so far that I'm talking about is just what to expect on your first couple of playthroughs. Now, once you've completed the game, in inverted commas, once you've reached the final boss, Dead Cells offers you the opportunity to up the difficulty by adding a boss cell, which also ups the rewards and expands upon the story. Completing this new game plus for the first time will award a second boss cell, upping the difficulty and rewards further, up to a total of 5 boss cells. There are also optional DLCs that can be purchased. Whilst the main game comes with several included DLCs, Twinmotion have been unrelenting in their support for Dead Cells since its release, and these additional DLCs do add new weapons and whole new challenging areas to explore if you're enjoying the game. To experience the full story of Dead Cells, you'll need to make it all the way to the 5th boss cell run, though the DLCs are optional, and crikey, that's a tough prospect, even if you're using a controller. And this brings me to the one downside with Dead Cells. If, like me, you have a controller or gamepad that you can use, Dead Cells absolutely shines. I mainly use my Razer Jungle Cat, and the game feels incredibly polished with it. Unfortunately, if you want to play with just touch controls, things aren't quite so ideal. That's not to say that the touch controls are bad, they're not, they're actually pretty well optimized, but without physical buttons to feel, it's incredibly easy to miss a vital tap in a crucial moment. Now, I've played the game through on standard difficulty using purely the touch controls, but at the higher difficulty settings, missing a dodge or hitting the wrong button can cost you an entire run. This drags the game kicking and screaming from challenging all the way down to cruel and frustrating. Now, unfortunately, this isn't so much a problem with the game as it is just a downside of this type of game being ported across to the mobile platform. This isn't something that Twinmotion can ever make a patch for. Maybe some folks are more skilled with touch than I am, and their thumbs are more dexterous or less chubby, and in fairness, I did find that mapping air triggers to my dodge and jump helped to mitigate a lot of this, but I feel it's fair to say that Dead Cells shines brightest with a gamepad connected. Fortunately, these are relatively cheap and readily available. I should probably do a video on some of these at some point. All in all, Dead Cells is a solid package. It's a game that is flooded from wall to wall with gameplay and content, enough that a year and a half on, I am still nowhere close to done with the game. It is challenging, it's vibrant, and it's endlessly fun, but on mobile, yeah, it's definitely best played with a gamepad. Dead Cells is available on PC, PS4, Xbox, Switch, iOS, and Android, including Google Play Pass. If you can, I strongly recommend giving this one a go.